What's up, world? What's going on? It's your boy. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's your main man, the author. Right blacking at that ass again. Here's another one. Should have said back at that ass, but I put black at that ass to personalize it. See if y'all caught that. But how y'all doing, man? Basically, I only speak when I have something to speak about. And today I want to talk about something crossed my mind, man. Banks versus churches, man. In most cases, even on the net and sometimes in the corporate ran media, they always talk bad about banks, man. How bankers are ripoffs and bankers bleed the people dry. Banks are frauds. Banks are just terrible. X, Y, Z, and the third. I hear it on the internet. Banks are bad. Banks are horrible. I hear that, man. And I'm not saying every banker is good. I'm not saying all bankers treat people well. I'm not saying, bankers don't draw racial lines. I think every institution does in the U.S. and abroad. But before you talk about bankers, man, and getting rid of the bankers, like I hear in, I think it was Iceland, they threw the bankers in prison for fraud. I hear that. But before you get rid of bankers, get rid of these crooked ass priests in these churches, man. Go after these churches first, man. All right? Go after these churches first, man, because churches are some of the biggest crooks I've ever seen. And I know banks, support pretty much all of your food chains and like your Quiznos, your Subways, all of your stores. Everything needs pretty much financial backing through banks. If the banks fold, everything else folds. I get that. But churches make so much money, man. I think they have their own banks. And churches are the last to help you, man, regardless of what your credit is. For example, in 2010, I was in dire straits. I thought I was gonna need some help. I might quite possibly lose my apartment. Right in 2010, I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a scary time in my life. Right, so just moved to a new place. Just came down to Charlotte. Didn't know what was going to happen. Right, so went out to social services. But I'm not a black woman with a bunch of kids. I'm just an educated brother trying to get his foot, trying to get his feet on the ground so I could take my first few steps. Of course, they didn't want to help me, right? You don't got no kids, fuck you, right? Like only females with, a bunch of kids have hard times, right? So, I only got kids everywhere, blah, 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 so I couldn't get too much help there. Got some now. They'll give you like food stamps, things like that, right? But ultimately, man, to try to keep my place, I called churches. Called a church. Hey, man, you guys, can you do anything for me? Blah, 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 blah. No. And this came to my mind because the firefighting department just called me and asked me for a donation. And then they act like I had to give them one. Oh, this is the time of the year, blah, blah, blah. Then I hung up and I'm thinking to myself, but what the fuck was y'all when I needed help? What the fuck was y'all 8 years ago? What the fuck was y'all, a week or two ago? But then they want to make it seem like they have, that you should give them help, right? So, but going back to my original story, so I called church after church, man. They couldn't help me. And then someone had the nerve to tell me that the church couldn't help me, but gave me their address in case I wanted to go to that church. And then I started thinking back, man. I started thinking about my grandparents, right? They have been going to this church, Antioch Baptist Church, probably even before I was born. So up until that point, before my grandmother passed, about 40 or 50 years, man. a long time, right? And I'm thinking to myself, when my grandmother passed, it was hard enough to get her favorite preacher to preach at her funeral. I repeat, it was hard enough to get her favorite preacher to preach at her funeral. So they didn't cover her burial expenses, right? But they had been paying tithes every time they passed the plate around, church anniversaries. That plate used to go around so many times, man. I'm like, damn, man. I couldn't believe it. Like, ain't no food in it. Plate always going around. If you've been to churches, especially Baptist churches, you black from the inner city, you know what I'm talking about. They'll pass that especially in the 80s. They'll pass that plate around. You'll put what you can in the plate. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch Google movie, or you can IMB a movie, Coming to America. When Eddie Murphy goes to the U.S. and tries to find his queen, and they pass the plate around, and the dude put a bone in the plate, as a joke. They pass the plate around, man. Antioch used to pass the plate around like 2-3 times every Sunday, man. Plus, they had a collection for the college fund. Plus, they had tithes. You had to give 10% tithe so you wouldn't go to hell, right? But the only person who was taken care of out of that deal was the preacher himself, man. If you're a preacher, they pay, and you had a big enough church, because it was roughly around 7,000 members, they paid for his house. He lived out in the suburbs, so he didn't even have to pay a mortgage. I repeat, he didn't even have to pay for a mortgage. They paid for his house out in Greece, which is a suburb in Monroe County. In Rochester, where I'm from. Rochester is also in Monroe County. Most of the blacks live in the inner city, right? And this is Rochester, New York, right? So he lived in Greece. They paid for his home, so he didn't have to pay any mortgage, and a bunch of other perks from what I hear. And I heard he had this Lincoln back in the day, man, where he could start this is back in the 80s, a Lincoln where he could start the car from inside the church and have the car like in the wintertime, right? Because in the wintertime up north, it's very, very cold, man. I mean, you got like 6-7 inches of snow for your months, January, sometimes up until April, it's snowing, right? So you don't want to be out there. Sometimes in November, as early as October, into October sometimes, it can start snowing, right? So you don't want to be out there when it's cold. So old boy used to start his Lincoln up when he was in the church. So by the time he got done with whatever he had to get done with in the church, his Lincoln was all toasty, man. So he can coast on home, back to the suburbs. Church was in the inner city. He lived in the suburbs, and the church paid for his home, right? But I guarantee you now, throughout all those years, I don't think my grandparents ever missed a tithe, meaning tithe means you give 10% to the church. I don't think they ever missed it. I think back in the day, you put the little amount in this yellow envelope. Had to give at least 10% of your earnings, or was supposed to. I don't think my grandparents ever missed that, right? And they said, well, if you miss that, you might go to hell, right? Plus, every time they pass the plate around, they put something in the plate. I never saw the preacher come around and ask, hey, are you guys doing okay? How is everything? You need anything? Even if he wasn't going to give money, just to ask, just to send a deacon and ask, hey, man, y'all need something? Y'all good? How's everything? I heard it was your birthday. Nothing. Never saw them come in the inner city at all. Nothing, right? Grandpa even bought a car so he can look good when he drove to church, right? All this invested, because church is nothing but to me a club for old blacks, man, for 50 and up predominantly. But now, for the most part, the black man has been kicked out of the church, because now it's mostly females and homosexuals. But during that time in the 80s, a lot of men still went to church. So not a dime, man. Not only did they not see a dime back, right? No one ever came by and said, "Hey, man, how y'all doing? Y'all need some potatoes, some bread. Are you okay? Are you breathing heavy? What's going on?" Even when my grandma passed, I think one reverend came by to the hospital, but I'm like, somebody has to die before y'all come to the hospital? Before y'all come and check on people? All those years that they was given to them, they was given to them since the 70s, man. Maybe even late 60s. But since the 70s, all the way up to the 90s, I think even into the 2000s. But when my grandma passed in 95, all that time may have been given to them, I guarantee. So, if they didn't check on us even once a month or once a year, if we had to ask them, say we had a fellow, we were blessed, we had the basics. But say if we, say if we didn't even need enough to survive, say if we needed something to survive, like say we needed like $40 to get us to the next paycheck so we can pay our mortgage. Do you think the church would have gave that to my family? Say if you didn't need enough to survive, say you just want a little extra so you can move out of the inner city, the drug infested inner city. Say you wanted a little loan to get a house, you only needed $1,500, matched up with the amount you already had, so you could save up to move to the suburbs. Do you think the church would have had that? Would have given them that? No, I don't think so, man. I don't think so, man. Now, at least with the banks, I've been with my credit union for like 20 years. You got good credit, you can get you a credit card. Some of them credit cards go up to $50,000, man. Now, of course, you got to pay monthly on that. But what I'm saying is, if I'm having a rough time throughout my week, right? To have a credit card, because people say after banks, but a lot of these people wouldn't be able to pay their mortgage or their rent without loans. I repeat, and a lot of white people are the ones benefiting off of this. You see these nice homes. They are, and as far as the middle class, you see these nice homes, man. They would not be able to keep that up if it wasn't for a credit card. I repeat, they would not be able to keep that lifestyle up if it wasn't for credit cards. Some of them got 6, 7, 8. All with, different credit lines of 50,000, 25,000, so on and so forth, right? So, I ain't even been with my credit union for probably as long as my grandparents have been to that church, man. If you got decent credit, which doesn't take much, right? You pay 6 months on a secured credit card, you can get your score up, man, at least past 620. Right? You go past 620, credit card companies will start looking at you, right? You can at least get that from the banks. But you can't, I don't care how much you invest in the church. The average church ain't giving you shit. They ain't checking on you. You ask the average church for a credit line of 50 grand, you think they're going to give it to you? But a lot of them have it. They try to pretend every year that the church wasn't paid off, but come on, man. Because I remember when I first started going to Antioch, it was like the church was in one room. No AC. I was a real little kid, man, like maybe 5 years old. No AC, right? You had them big ass fans, and you fan like this, and it was hot as a bitch in the church. It was in one room when they had colored glass. You had them big ass fans and you fanned, and that shit didn't do nothing, man. You was hot as a bitch. I was hot. I remember being hot as fuck, right? Then all of a sudden, when 1990 came, the size of the church increased by like 10 times. Big as a bitch. I'm like, whoa, big ass church. AC, internal AC. What the fuck? And you got AC up north, because in the South, you have to have it legally. But up north, that's a big thing to have centralized air. had centralized air, the place increased, but they claim every year that the church wouldn't pay it off. How is that, man? And none of those members can ask for not one nickel. But every week, if you don't pay your tithe, then you'll go to hell. Man, the church is the biggest racket in America, probably in the world, man. I don't want to hear no talk against the banks unless people come after these crooked ass churches, especially the crooked ass churches in the inner city. I repeat, especially the crooked ass churches in the inner city. I repeat, especially the crooked ass churches in the inner city, man. They is taking blacks for a ride. These black women are being pimped. And from what I hear, in the 70s, when the cops chased the pimps off the street, they went into the churches. And I believe that. Because a lot of those black men that are preaching, man, they don't have a 4-year degree in theology. They should. They don't have a 4-year degree in theology, man. That should be standard if you're going to call yourself a preacher. They don't got no 4-year degree in theology. They're not saying everybody have to have a degree, but I'm just saying, you preaching to people, you know what I mean, you taking scripts from the Bible, you know what I mean, a lot of preachers have to write out their sermons. You know what I'm saying? So if you're looking at the Bible and you're writing out, you're based on the scripture, you're interpreting the scripture, and then you have to break that down so the people can understand that. That's kind of equivalent to writing a paper, man. 5 to 7 pages. If one verse might be 7 to 10 pages, right? And then you're memorized, you break it down, you write it out, you put it on cue cards, you remember certain parts, right? And then, whatever certain parts you remember, certain parts you can add in stuff, take stuff out, and then that's your 15 or 20-minute sermon, right? So you should have some type of, because the average high school don't teach you how to write and break stuff down and speak to people. Colleges usually do that. I mean, yeah, sometimes a few courses when I was in my senior year in high school kind of touched on that, but college majors in showing you how to do that, how to look at certain paragraphs and certain paragraphs in books, take those paragraphs, break down the meanings of what those paragraphs mean, put that into your own words, and then be able to, talk to the people about those passages, right? Yeah, you should have some type of, but a lot of these cats, these preachers do not have a degree in theology. They degree is in pretty much pimpology, where they got the gift of gab. Now some stuff like gift of gab is something you can't even teach in college, and that's very valuable. And in a lot of ways, that's more profitable than brothers who come out of college with the 4-year. If you can do the gift, if you have the gift of gab very well, like a Iceberg Slim or like in the movie Mac, like a Goldie. Like very few preachers have that. But if you do have that knack like that, then yeah, man, you can make some serious money. Because there's a lot of preachers out here, but they don't have a lot of members. But if you're talking about you got 3, 4, and 5,000 members, 7,000 members, 10,000 members and up, you like a Goldie, and you don't have a degree in theology. Yeah, I'm not saying a brother that's coming out of college can't be a pimp as well, but you went to no school, you used to be a pimp, and you go into the church, you like a Goldie. And I believe that some people who came out of college will be more open to actually helping the community. Because I'm like, all the money my grandparents and other blacks put into the church, other black families like my grandparents who were old, people going in there, they 80, 90, whatever. They go there until they so old, till they pretty much go from the church to the hospital. Why doesn't the black community have a bank? A bank created, a bank backed by the church. And I'm not saying the bank has to be right in the heart of the ghetto, But why don't those church members have their own personal bank or their own personal credit union where they can get lines of credit and shit like that after putting in a church, after investing in a church for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? You can't get shit out of an average church, man. No matter, regardless if you're a member or you're not a member. At least with banks, if I got good credit, hell, I can get me a credit line maybe for up to, if I can't get 50,000, maybe I can get 25,000. Even if it's been 20 years, that's worth it. You can't get shit out of these churches, man. Every church in 2010 told me no. And even if I had been a member, it would have been the same thing, because churches don't help people. You know, they might throw out some hand-me-downs to some of the homeless people, which they say they do. Like, you know, once in a blue moon every Thanksgiving, giving shoes or clothes out. But they use that as a tax write-off. That ain't shit. What about your members, people who've been members for 30, 40 years, and they can't even get, because I never remember our family getting a turkey from the church. Never. Never. Right? Now, shit, not even a visit from them on Thanksgiving. But the preacher, he got a house out in the suburbs. So before you talk against banks, talk against these churches, man. Fix these churches up. These churches is no good, man. These churches is just Broadway pimping. You know, Goldie, Iceberg, Slim, Don, Juan, you know, just pimping, man. Don Magic Wand pimping. People talk about the banks is who we should go after first. No, the churches is who you should go after first. I don't know if the churches might have more money than the banks. These churches got lots of money, man. Even down here in Charlotte, man, some of these churches are like immaculate. Like they got their own. That shit is crazy. Nice place to sit down, but a person can't ask for shit. And I'm not saying you should beg the church, but they always begging. And begging hard. You don't pay your tithes, you're going to hell. But the church been paid off. What you still need all this money for? If the church is paid off, why do you have to pass around the plate so hard? The more money they got, the more times they passed around the plate. I repeat, the more money they got, the more they pass around the plate. Because when ABC or Antioch Baptist Church was just a regular church in like one room, I didn't really see a plate like that, man. You might see it once. But when that church expanded in 1990, where it was like 10 times the size, man, that plate used to go around. They started making up shit because it used to just come around once or twice. And they had a so-called college fund, and they had you have a church anniversary. It come around some more times, and then before you go, you got to pay the tithe, and then sometimes you got to go to another church because they have an anniversary because that preacher trying to help that other preacher out. All type of shit. All type of shit. And they busted Jim and Tammy Faye Baker back in the 80s. They said they was making so much motherfucking money. Their dog had centralized air in his doghouse. I repeat, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker was making so much money, they dog had centralized AC in his doghouse. I grew up, we didn't have centralized air. And we were lower middle class. We had a nice place, a 2-story home. Well, my grandparents did, but we stayed with them. But they had a nice place, no centralized air. They dog had centralized air. The pet, you know how much money you got? It's like come on, man. You know what the dog house must have looked like? The dog had centralized air. The dog had AC. The fuck out of here, man. Telling you, these churches are high time pimping. That's why I say I want to hear shit about the banks. I'm not saying all banks are honest. Everybody know that they're probably not, but they are not more crooked than these churches. Step to the churches before you step to the banks. These churches will put these banks to shame. Like, God damn. And won't give you a nickel, won't give you a line of credit, won't give you shit. I don't want to hear about those few clothes that they pass out to the homeless during. Come on, man. Y'all got a lot more than that. What y'all doing for the members? What y'all do for the community? Especially for the black churches. I know at least for some of those white churches, they'll fund the colleges. But even still, some of these white churches are still ripping people off. So before you talk about the churches, before you talk about the banks, talk about these churches, man. But I'm gonna cut this short, man. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell. Especially too, man, for you guys who stop to leave a comment, it'll make more sense to like. Either like or dislike or do something, because if you took enough time out of your day to like or dislike, that means that my message must have resonated with you somehow. Meaning it must have stirred up some feelings in you, you know? So, you're not going to waste your time to type a comment on a video that didn't spark any type of emotion in you. So it makes no sense to leave a comment and then not either like or dislike the video. So be sure to like or dislike, especially if you leave a comment first. All right. And it's your boy, the author, and I'm signing out.